So sometimes what we need is programmer not only required to access the values, but they are sometimes interested in also determining the index where these values or where the data is placed. So in this example, so what it is doing is it is first len data. What does it do? What is the purpose of the len function? Len function calculates the size of the list. Okay, so data is a list here, and len function calculates the size, which means what would be the output of this, only this function? 3. And we are passing this value 3 into a range function, which means it will generate the numbers from 0, 1 and 2, and then we are looping through these values. Okay, so and we are storing these values in an index. So we are doing some complicated stuff here. So here you can see data is the name of the list, and we are passing the index value. Remember, in the quick recap, we discussed how we can access the element by specifying its index value. So we use the range function to write the loop, and in every iteration we get the value, index value, starting from 0, 1 and 2. Okay, so in the first time, index value is 0. The 0th element, which is the element which is placed at the 0th index, will be extracted from the data list and will be assigned to a variable name value. And what we are doing next is we are not only printing the index, but its corresponding value as well. Okay, we can also do it like this with the help of index method. So we discussed while we were discussing list, we discussed that we can use the index method. We specify the value in the container, and if we know the value. Okay, so once we know the value, the index method return its corresponding index value, which means that where this particular data value is placed in the container. So we are looping through the data structure, which is the data here, and in every iteration it will retrieve the value. So in the first time, it will retrieve a and assign to a value, variable name value. Okay, and what we are doing now here is we are running an index method on this list data.index, and we are passing the value. It should return the index of this value, where this value is placed. So it will be returning again 0, 1, 2. Are you following what we are doing here? So there is another easier way in Python, which we call this enumerate function. So if we use enumerate function, it helps us access, it returns actually not only the value but also the index. It returns these two values, index and its associated value, in the form of a tuple. Okay, so it retrieves both the index and corresponding element value at the same time, and again it's a clear and readable solution. The for loop unpacks the tuple yielded by each iteration, which means that, so for example, again we have this data. What I'm doing is, instead of iterating through the list directly, I'm iterating through the enumerate function, passing this data into enumerate function. Okay, so what will happen when the for loop executes first time? Okay, when the for loop executes first time, it returns the first value and its index in this order. So index comes first and the value comes next. Okay, these are again the variable names. You can give any name to this. I have chosen index here and the value here, just to make things more clear and more significant. So when this function, enumerate function, executes, it will retrieve the first element. So first element is retrieved with the help of looping. Okay, when the first element is retrieved, which means 4 will be retrieved. So 4 will be placed here, and its corresponding index 0 will be placed at index value. Okay, understand? And when we execute this thing, it will be the same output. So instead of doing this extra stuff, we can simply use enumerate function. Okay, now here, as I said, for, let's say, for oh sorry, thanks for pointing this out. Okay, so for let's say I or A, let's say A, or simply if I say value in if data equals A, B, and C. For value in data, in every iteration value will be containing, in for example the 0th iteration, first iteration, second iteration, the value will be containing what? A, and then B, and then C. Okay, now if I replace this thing with for, I will write something here later, in enumerate, which is the function that we have just discussed, and pass data list in it. Okay, now what will happen? Enumerate function returns a tuple. Returns means like it, where you provide some input, it returns an output in the form of a tuple containing two values. Okay, and those two values are the index and the actual value. So index and value. Okay, so in the 0th iteration, what will it return? IND and value, and their value would be in order 0 and here A. Okay, so A is the value which is placed at 0th index. In the next iteration, what will happen? Index and value will be containing, in order in value will be containing 1, and the actual value will be B. Okay, now you might be given it's a conceptual question. Instead of writing this, you could be asked like for, let's say, value, index, in, and exactly same thing, enumerate. So during the first iteration, what will be the value of value? If I ask you in 0th iteration, what is index? In the 0th iteration, if we are looping through this loop for this data, we know that data is this. Okay, let me grab this here also. Okay, so this is data. So in the 0th iteration of this loop, what will be the value of index? It's a very simple question, yeah. 0. Why 0? Okay, I'll get back to you. Estella, you wanted to say something? It will be A. So I have just named these values. I have just changed the names of these variables. So I said that enumerate function returns the tuple in order that such that the first element is the index always, and the second one is the actual value. It does not matter what you name it. You could name it A comma B, you could name it index comma value, you could name it value comma index, but naming it like this does not mean that this first element will be containing actual value. Okay, the value will always be the second element in tuple. Okay, so this is a conceptual question you might expect in the exam. Okay, any question? Hannah, you wanted to say something?
I was going to ask if there's...
Should I go back to the whiteboard?
Oh no, I mean on this slide, is there a... is for the first two coding blocks...
Yeah.
Is one method explicitly better than the other, or are you just...
No.
Okay.
It's two different ways of achieving the same task, like accessing the value and accessing the index.
Okay.
And whenever you come across a situation like this, you better use enumerate function instead of doing this, like it's a more number of lines of codes compared to this one. Okay.